It's time once again for Dialogue Conspiracy with political research specialist Mae Brussell, who for 5 years has shared with us her extensive research into political assassinations and abuses of power in this country. Her program relates the news of the week to emerging evidence about the conspiracy which allegedly maintains by force its control over the legislative, executive, and judicial processes in America. And now, Mae Brussell.
We'll start over. It's Mae Brussell in Carmel, California. This is Dialogue Conspiracy number 267, and it's May the 2nd, 1977. I thought I'd begin Dialogue Conspiracy by describing the magazine that was told on the news service. It was in the newspapers this week, called Assassin. You may or may not heard of it. I got a copy of it, and it's a very interesting magazine. Of course, I've been studying assassinations for 13 years, and I thought I'd give you the address of where you can get this magazine if you want it, if the subject of assassinations interests you. Assassin can be ordered by writing to Can-Am Media, P.O. Box 233, Rouse's Point, R-O-U-S-E-S Point, New York, 12979. Now, what is the purpose of Assassin? The publisher has an article, an editorial in the beginning of the magazine, and I want to share it with you because assassinations are common in our society, and I think they are just about as common as sports games or music or any of the other sections you see in the newspaper or magazines that we have on various subjects, whether it's motorbikes or campers or embroidery or needlework. Assassinations are a part of life, just like the magazines came out with sexual pictures and articles and letters to the editor and experiences of sexual relationships that became more upfront on the magazine stands. This magazine purports to tell you what's going on in the world, the section of assassinations. The beginning editorial and quotations from a man who does assassinations is important, and some of the tone of what is printed here reminds me of the same tone of the gentleman who called me several months ago and told me that he had done 10 assassinations for the CIA. I'm going to read a little bit of this to you to show you the tone of the magazine and tell you a little bit about the contents of the first issue. The publisher said, with some trepidation, we present a new kind of magazine. It's a sort of Time magazine for espionage, sabotage, and assassination. The sources are unique. They will be first-hand: KGB, CIA, National Security Agency, French and English agents, or independent spies. We will take you inside the world of the spy. This is the core of the world around you. We will print plans of bombs to awaken people to the fact that they are readily available and can be done. Our cover is unnerving. It has a picture of Jimmy Carter with a scope on the front cover for the first issue. And they admit that the cover is unnerving, and you may think it's in bad taste, but we want to call attention to a whole new technological world of death, to prime the consciousness of you for the acceptance and the understanding of new risks. We seek to balance existing violence with exposure, to reduce the prospect of major actions through discovery. I think that's important. I think that's one of the purposes of Dialogue Conspiracy that I do these shows every week or continue my research, is not just to finger certain people that are involved in these various murders and conspiracies and hoping that they'll get any kind of legal justice, but hoping that by getting the formula or the pattern of these murders, people will be able to catch conspiracies and not accept them as suicides or homicides, simple murders, and see them for what they are, because they do affect our lives, and maybe expose the people behind them. The magazine goes on to say you will have a first-hand account from contract killers, and here's a quotation from one gentleman who wrote in the first issue, and this is the part that is similar to the agent that had called me. This gentleman said, I am a businessman. I set up marketable situations, and then I peddle them. I look for backing for my projects in the same way that a writer looks for a publisher or a man looks to sell perfume. My business is the rearrangement of life called death. I do on weekends what desk-bound, over-the-hill generals pay other men to do for their careers. I operate under a variety of code names or even the absence of them. I maintain satellites of contacts as intelligence gatherers, as a barrier and structure for the world. I am very expensive. I'm paid through Swiss banks and various dummy corporations. I used to be an accountant. I still am an accountant. Only bodies to me are ciphers in ledger books, and life is so fragile anyway. Does it matter if we die at 17 or 70? It doesn't matter what you plan for the next week. This magazine is a wonderful idea. You see, working in a secret profession is quite a burden. It doesn't allow for professional pride. It takes a great deal of skill, enormous daring, to do what I have to do, and I'm proud of my skills. This is a paid killer, writing for the first issue of Assassin. I'm tough and clever, he said, and I want you people to know it. This is my world. Take a look. It's a brief one. You may not see it again. This is a prose book for the pros, and that makes me feel better, he said. 10 years ago, I was an accountant sitting in a house smoking a bent cigarette. I wasn't as tall as I'd like to be or as slender as I wanted to be, not as handsome as I think I am. I joined a mercenary group. I dropped everything, and for the first time I felt alive, and I loved it. And I grappled with the edges of life. I am the author of coups, massive coups, complicated assassinations. My work is every bit an art form. A government is a kind of business. Its leaders don't go into it for the salary or the privilege of being pillared in the press or in the gallery. There is a booty to be had. Not only does Lockheed pay well, and companies like them, but governments pay other governments. Official companies do. So that when a man wishes to pull off a coup, it isn't to be the savior of his people at all. It is expensive, and he has to deal with people like me. Political assassination is a method of rearrangement. It's my specialty, he claimed. Political slaughter is an effort at problem solving. And he goes into the price of killing somebody in Ireland or working for the fascists. Why does a man become a mercenary? A mercenary is a man hired to kill private individual that makes it look as if a large organization isn't behind it. He's just earning a living at this. He said some are compulsive neurotics or little men who want adventure in their lives and realize too late that they're sitting around with nothing to do. He said everyone, and I mean everyone, is capable of killing. And this aside from self-defense. It is our government who orders us to kill. They grab us and send us off to wars. We kill for love, to prevent the extinction of life or danger of children we would kill. A human being will take almost anything and believe almost anything. The more organized and the greater the kill, the more we laud the killer. Death has been rewarded for centuries, and this is true, and the more we laud the generals, they become the most successful of the mass murderers. I think of that because when you travel in Europe and you see the monuments to the generals, the museums to wars, and the accounts of the Crusades, the Inquisitions, the various people who have killed politically, they become famous. Alexander the Great, Napoleon's tomb, Hitler's Germany, the various places where Hitler did his mass slaughter, they become really successful because they become heroes to the people. In this magazine, you will see the darkest side of the world. It is a manual for the illustration of the workings of our new politicized order. You will understand the practical problems of methodical craftsmen. Do not attribute the execution or planning of these contracts to me. Through me, this world flows to you. The hiring, the planning, the execution of the events which mark the turning point in the political epochs of our lives. You will meet the work of many talents in this magazine. It is the way governments survive, and you should know this, and they will continue to do this until they are stopped. That is the editorial to a magazine called Assassin. I know 13 years ago when I bought newspapers and wanted articles on the assassination of John Kennedy, and then bought the Warren Report, and then bought the government hearings, the 26 volumes of hearings before the commission, I was studying who killed President Kennedy. And before long, I was beginning to understand who killed Medgar Evers, and then Malcolm X, and then Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy, and Mary Jo Kopechne up at Chappaquiddick, and the shooting of George Wallace, and a series of California violences. And then I began to understand more and study the killing of the Lindbergh baby or the Sacco Vanzetti case and the Rosenbergs, the electrocution of the Rosenbergs, and the killing of 100 witnesses to the John Kennedy assassination or 30 to the Robert Kennedy assassination. And I didn't mean to go into the study of these murders, but what this man is saying is absolutely true. This is what is going on in this world, and this magazine is important. If it isn't used just as an anti-Russian propaganda, it's important. And there's some interesting articles in the first issue. The first article there is called Scandal in Philadelphia. It's on the bungling of the Legionnaire disease. They said it was plain old-fashioned murder when 29 died and 150 were hospitalized. And goes on to say a score of the world's best mercenaries say that it was a top-class hit, that these people were killed on purpose. And just as the other political investigations were fouled up and total failures, the article goes on to say there was no investigation that ever took place. The case was completely bungled. They also have a blueprint for the future assassination of Fidel Castro, who would do it, how they would do it, the decisions of the National Security Council, how they make a decision, what it's based upon, how they bring people in that are close to Castro, and they have a blueprint on that. They also have a first article on the John Kennedy assassination. And part of the article says, within a year of John Kennedy's death, Castro ordered his own investigations to find out if his own people were involved. And their conclusion was, it is the official assessment of Cuban intelligence that John Kennedy was hit by his own government. The planning was initiated by U.S. counterintelligence. And they have quite a long article. On the profile of an assassin, they have, of course, a little bit of the sex with the KGB, the Russians' use of sex and luring people into sexual situations to obtain information. But this is the first issue, and I think the idea of this magazine may seem gross to you. I think to have a scope on the face of the president while he's still alive is much more rewarding, and to study the way assassinations take place than to wait until he's dead and then publish these magazines with pictures of the scope. I know that the way that these assassinations happen is consistent with all that I've studied. The patterns are the same, the altering of evidence, the mismanagement of the fingerprints, the actual witnesses that could verify where these people were locked up in mental hospitals or they're killed. And the ballistics is way off. The amount of bullets that are shot is always greater than the amount that they admitted they found with a lone assassin. There's a mishandling of physical evidence, and there's a mishandling of witness testimony, and there's a formula. Just as you bake a cake or play a game, the rules of the game, there isn't a formula in these assassinations, and it's consistent, and therefore I think it's justified to come out with a magazine on it. In the back of the magazine, they have a page called Gossip, Dirt and Predictions, and there were several things here which are of interest to what I've been saying on Dialogue Conspiracy for a long time. The first point was, it has been discovered that the Nazis of South America and the United States intelligence agencies are working together. The new Nazi power structure is no longer composed of brown-shirted, foot-stomping buffoons, but tough and resourceful moneymen who deal in political leaders as they would a commodity. The new Fuhrer would look more like Kennedy. The Nazis offered their network and their power to the U.S. to fight the growing left-wing thrust in South America. The U.S. has accepted and provided favors and protection in return. I really believe that the Nazis were set up for a resurgence of the Fourth Reich, and that they are working with our agencies, and the network is the Drug Enforcement Agency, and the linking of the Nazis from Interpol from beginning of World War II to the present is very strong, and to the CIA and to known racists and known German Nazis. And we're going to see a resurgence around the world because World War II will become World War III if there are people who resist the Nazification. But this magazine, it goes into that, and they're going to have an article in the next issue or so. They're taking subscriptions now, and there's a mention of more on the Nazis and the United States government. And, of course, you know that's of interest to me. Speaking of assassinations, some of you may or may not have seen, it's in the Morning Chronicle today from Newsday in New York City, an article about an agent named R. Lewis Pincus, who photographed himself on the Tomorrow Show with a hood on his head. And he said that he was offered money to kill President Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines, that he was part of an assassination team. He's still in the United States, and one of his team was arrested and received a 6-year jail sentence for plans to kill Marcos. But what is new about the story is that he said it wasn't individuals who wanted to kill the Philippines president, but the Central Intelligence Agency, which is almost like a rerun record. Again, the CIA trying to kill a president of another country. The article came out in Newsday, and I noticed that it was not carried, at least at this time, by the Associated Press or the United Press. And Newsday magazine is one of the few independent newspapers in the country that has done investigative work, and they were on the enemy list of Richard Nixon at the time he was in office. And I read that Newsday is being bought up by Mobil Oil, which is Rockefeller. So this may be the erasing of one more source of independent news coverage. This kind of thing did not go over the major wire service, as I say, but did get into Newsday and then the San Francisco Chronicle. But the important thing about Mr. Pink is, in addition to his surfacing now to saying that he was part of a plan from the CIA to kill the president of the Philippines, was that he was involved in gambling in New York City, in the numbers racket, in the syndicate, and organized crime. And being high up in the gambling echelon, he was recruited to set up the assassination. This is identical to the CIA asking Robert Mayu to hire gamblers to assassinate Fidel Castro. He was also an informant for the FBI, and he was a paid agent for the Drug Enforcement Administration. I don't know how many of you read recently the article on the DEA about Mitchell Wordbell, who was a white Russian violent anti-communist who works with the DEA and the assassination teams, and there's allegations that the CIA and the FBI are using the Drug Enforcement Agency not to stop the flow of narcotics into this country, but for the purpose of assassination teams to kill the left, any member of the leftist group or leaders or labor leaders in Central South America, particularly in those countries. And this man supports this use of the criminal element inside the DEA, the FBI, and the CIA to set up gambling operations in the Philippines. Now, one of the people that he recruited, Pincus recruited for the job, was a William Silverman, who had been convicted in 1972 of transporting stolen securities and counterfeiting $1.1 million in securities. The article didn't say if anyone was arrested for printing the money. He was arrested for transporting it in 72, and then he got out and was to go to the Philippines and help kill the president. Larry Trackman, T-R-A-C-T-A-M, T-M-A-N, was mentioned in the article, from California, who was a CIA operative who was also involved in the plans. And the plans were for the CIA to recruit men for organized crime, the same as these other assassination teams, such as the CIA using Jack Ruby to kill Lee Harvey Oswald for them. The organized crime were to get hitmen, professional killers. Again, this goes back like the magazine The Assassin, and their job is to get professional killers. And what were they to get out of it? They were told that there were a number of reasons for killing Marcos, but they were promised that if they would kill him, these men could take over the casinos in the Philippines, and they would be run by the criminal families, and organized crime would have those concessions. Now, that's exactly what happened in 1960-61 when the invasion of Cuba was planned, and then another invasion was planned. The organized crime, we're told, you can have the gambling casinos, and the oil people, the people over in the Philippines that want the rubber, the minerals, the oil, the resources there, would take the goodies from under the earth or above and give the gambling narcotics trade to the mafia. That seems to be the deal that's made between the CIA, the FBI, and organized crime. We'll take the natural resources, the oil and the minerals and the labor, and we'll give you the gambling syndicate and the narcotics traffic. And if you'll do the killing so that we can conquer and take the heads of states, then we'll let you have these tables. And they also told him that he would not be charged for other arrests. The government would give him favors, and he would have $125,000 plus immunity from arrest. And again, this is an article in 1977, but this happened at the time of the other contracts to kill foreign heads of states. The government pays a flat fee, and then they use men with known criminal backgrounds, even agent provocateurs like Donald DeFreeze or Louis Tackwood, men from the street scene or higher up who've had arrests of some kind. They get them off the arrest, and they guarantee them you'll never go to jail for what you did before or what we know about you now. And it's called, I call it, keeping them on a leash. It's a common practice to hire somebody who could have a prison record and guaranteeing them. Then you see, once they work for the CIA, they can't ever be prosecuted. Sam Giancana was going to be prosecuted on various charges. He told the Justice Department, wait a minute, I work for the CIA. They couldn't touch him. John Rosselli was going to be deported. Member of organized crime. The law enforcement come to him, he says, wait, I work for the FBI and CIA. They can't touch him. So that Mr. Pincus was told, you can't be arrested, we'll protect you, and so forth. They gave him a long thing about Marcus, the spiel that Marcus was using money in his pocket, which probably was true, that he took foreign aid and it went in his pocket. So did Premier Thu, so did Premier Key, so did Mr. Park in South Korea. This is common knowledge, and he said that money for defense went into his hands, and this has been true all along, that these dictatorships that we propped up were nothing but payoffs in order to keep the minerals and the resources and the labor, as I say, and the bases for the American government. He said that if it was a simple contract to kill, they just say, here's the money and here's the gun. But they gave him a whole bunch of excuses on Marcos and reasons why he had to be killed, and he knew that it was for the CIA. Mr. Pincus went on to say that he wanted to surface at this time. Evidently, he feels that he's going to get the treatment that Sam Giancana and John Rosselli and all the other mafia men have gotten, the informants that work for the FBI and CIA, and so he's coming out at this time to disclose what happened with that plot down there. There was a report in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 1973 that lists the names of Mr. Louis Pincus and Larry Trackman of California. They were listed along with a hitman, Vietnam veteran from Nashville, Tennessee, by the name of August McCormick. I think the motives for hiring men, the way they protect them, has so many similarities, and I bring it up because it was in the paper today, and it is consistent with this new magazine called Assassin that will be coming out, of the way the patterns keep repeating themselves. Nothing changes. The lies that they give for killing these leaders, like a lone crazy man, King Faisal, Saudi Arabia, was killed. They have excuses. The nephew killed him because he was on acid. None of these things are true. The government changes hands. We make deals with the new killers, and the point is that the CIA has been behind all of these because the pattern is always the same. And they're happening today. And I hope that more and more people who are hired will speak up, and they will express themselves in these magazines and come out with evidence until we're forced to stop doing these killings. There was an article last week. There were several articles in the newspaper that I didn't have a chance to go into because I covered a lot on the de Mohrenschildt story. But along the line of assassinations, the New York Times had an article, Murders That Baffled the FBI, and these FBI agents had a meeting in San Diego to solve what they called mysterious killings of various FBI informers and people working for them, members of the organized crime. It's too bad the FBI had to use organized crime to do their work in the first place. There's another article in Time magazine, New Mafia Killer, A Silenced 22, and there was an article, another one in the San Francisco Chronicle, again from Newsday. The FBI is in a panic over the mafia informers purge. Now, I called to Washington and wanted to go to San Diego and speak to these men and say, why do you have to go into the assumption that the mafia is killing the FBI informers? Why couldn't it be the CIA killing them? Right away, it says a panic over the mafia purge. The FBI is worried. And the hitmen, the interest in the hitmen is always diverted over to the organized crime killing each other, which is a big lie. Why wouldn't the CIA be killing their witnesses now that Congress is opening up the various assassinations? So these agents met, came from across the country, and they met in San Diego to solve mysterious killings. They said in the last 2 years of the .22 caliber pistol, 20 people have been killed, and a number of them were informers for the FBI. And they were worried because a number were prepared to testify against underworld figures. Well, they also could be prepared to tell what was coming down, who was hiring, just like Mr. Pincus is talking now. I believe that these people have been killed because they could provide information, not because the mafia was worried about them, but because the FBI and the CIA had used them. And there was an article, as I say, in Newsday, "New Panic in the FBI over the Mafia Informer Purge." It goes on to say the gun used recently to silence so many informers and dissidents would have never been used by professional gangland assassins 2 years ago. The mob usually used the .38 revolver, Beretta automatic, and it goes on to say that the .22 caliber automatic was a favorite of agents of the OSS during World War II and then the CIA, and it's muffed by a silencer and it gives a pop-up noise. And they go on, the press, Newsday goes on to say that the mob became interested in the .22, which is a CIA silencer. And I think that the CIA is doing the killing. It's true the mob could get the guns, but that doesn't mean that the CIA hasn't been doing the killings, just like they've been killing all the witnesses to the assassinations. If there's 100 people that have been murdered that are related in some way to the John Kennedy assassination, and they're killed off, then certainly 22 FBI mafia-linked gentlemen could be killed off as part of that list and be killed off by the CIA, the same people that are killing the witnesses. Just a few months ago on KLRB, I did a show about Fred Nagel. He's a Secret Service agent in Los Angeles who was arrested and finally dropped from his job because he took weapons and ammunition from the armory, from the CIA, and was distributing them, a special gun that was made, and distributing the ammunition to other people. In fact, a man who was charged with murder was working with this particular agent, Fred Nagel, the Secret Service. And the important thing about Mr. Nagel, he worked down in Los Angeles area. He used to guard Gerald Ford, and he was fired from the Treasury Department when they found out that he had these guns. And he had secret guns. He had a machine gun that on his car that was, in quotes, stolen from the car. He had 40 rounds of magazine ammunition, 9mm ammunition, to 650 bullets a minute. Could go through a sophisticated weapon, which he said was stolen or never recovered. But he could have left the trunk open so that it could go to somebody and later be used as the weapon for assassination. He worked with weapons that were silencers. He had special ammunition issued to him from the Naval firing range from Seal Beach. And this ammunition ended up in the hands of a Mr. Wasteman, who was involved with 2 executions in San Bernardino County. And they were working with weapons and silencers and CIA guns that would be linked to the CIA. So the important thing, the point I want to make, is that these articles that are coming out by the FBI and Time Magazine and Newsday claiming that the mafia is doing killing with weapons similar to CIA is ridiculous. There's no reason to think that the CIA isn't doing the killings and isn't using the same weapon they've always used. There was an article in the Houston Post last September, which I have, about a gentleman files charge. This is the name of the article. Charges filed in arms cache. A 35-year-old engineer designer who federal agents said rented a warehouse where a large cache of arms was found, was charged in federal court and placed under custody. His name is William Prescott Morris, and he had a large supply of weapons. He had small guns, ammunition, blasting caps, silencers, machine guns, TNT. He worked for the Loomis Construction Company. He worked for Howard Hughes Corporation. At his hearing, the government told the U.S. magistrate that in addition to the arms, the agents found birth and death certificates in the warehouse, and that the silencers were bound for Mexico and Saudi Arabia. Now, this particular person, Ronnie Vaughn McCandless, 38-year-old machinist, worked with the Hughes Tool Company, has posted federal bond, and is still held in state custody. A Mr. Morris and a Mr. McCandless working for the Loomis Construction and the Hughes Tool Company. Now, he had an arsenal of weapons with silencers, with birth certificates, death certificates, weapons, ammunition, and he distributes them in Saudi Arabia and Mexico. So why can't he deliver these from the Hughes Tool Company to Mexico, where the members of the organized crime then go down there, pick up their weapons, and do the killings of the witnesses? It's perfectly obvious that the Treasury Department allows weapons to be stolen. The Loomis Corporation, the Hughes people in Houston had weapons, false IDs, and the kind of weapons that would confuse an agency, not very long, I don't believe, but the important thing is that they blame the mafia for now using their kind of weapons when they are distributing these weapons all over the world. You look at the kind of witnesses that the FBI was worried about, and you can see why they would want them killed. One was Edward Lazar, who was gunned down in Phoenix, February 1975, a day before he was to testify on a land fraud problem with Ned Warren. Ned Warren's name came up in the Bowles murder in Phoenix, Arizona, and there's a lot of Republican money, land frauds tied up, and names such as Barry Goldwater and his brother in those new investigative reports of what's going on, why Don Bowles, a reporter, was killed, and Ned Warren's name comes in those reports. So it's interesting that a man that was to testify against Ned Warren, Edward Lazar, was hit. Another man they mentioned was Sam Giancana, who was subpoenaed to testify regarding his work for the CIA. Jake Molinas worked and sold assassination kits to the mob. And Mr. Garrett was a minor source of these weapons. He had assassination kits that he sold out of Florida, and he was very good at this. He had .22 murder weapons, and he had a little suitcase. The kit had Luger-type automatic .22s, silencers, an attaché case through which the gun could be fired, a pull ring near the handle automatically fired the clip of 8 to 10 rounds with a silencer with deadly accuracy. The August Maniaci, M-I-N-I-A-C-I, was an FBI informer in Milwaukee. He was a friend of Sam Giancana's who worked for the CIA. He was killed. Tamara Rand, a San Diego businesswoman, was an informer for the Justice Department. She was working on the Teamsters Union pension funds, which again involves Richard Nixon's gang and the Republican Party and the scandals they were trying to hide that were linked to Watergate, and this particular woman was killed. There's a reason to see why they were killed, and there's more reason to believe that the government wanted them dead than the organized crime. Leo Lipsy Mokari, a hitman, was killed August 22nd, 1976 in Ohio. He was a secret informer for the Drug Enforcement Administration. Joseph Lee Moheski of Fresno was shot September 1st. He was involved with organizing pornography on the West Coast. He died September 1st, 1976, and in December 76 is when Robert Hall was killed in Los Angeles and one of the gentlemen involved in that murder was into pornography and organized crime and worked with the Hughes organization, the Los Angeles Police Department. Another man involved with pornography, Paul Gonski, a major Chicago porno theater operator, was murdered. But there's no reason to believe that these men were not linked to the same Los Angeles group that worked with the CIA. Another man, Anthony Peter Gambino Jr., was killed February the 1st, and Carlo Gambino, he was a cousin, he also was murdered. He was an informer for the FBI. He was murdered, and they even bragged that they gave an overdose of swine flu injection. He has a bad heart. Frank Bompancero down in San Diego, an FBI informer, was murdered, a close informer, Joseph Bonanna, and he worked with the FBI. And there's a whole list. There's 22 people that have been murdered, but each one of them has links to the FBI, the CIA, the pornography, the murder of Robert Hall, the killing of John Kennedy. Some of them were involved, and some were involved in the assassination plans to kill Castro. And I think the efforts, again, you can't trust Time magazine, but the efforts to say a new mafia killer, a silenced 22, is ridiculous. And I think you have to analyze how these people are dying or why. I received a book from a listener. I have to return it. He loaned it to me about a year ago. And I never did a radio show on it, and I received it. It's called Silencers, Snipers, and Assassins. And maybe we can put some of this book in that magazine, Assassin, write it up. It's put out by Palladian Press. It says an overview of Whispering Death. And this book goes into the .22 that was used by the Special Forces, a silencer-equipped .22. And I'll read you a little bit of this book because it says that it was perfected in Vietnam, the soldiers' military occupation in Indochina. The military wanted silencers for 3 reasons. After firing with a regular gun, there's too much noise, and you'll be able to trace the path of the person who's shooting. With these silencers, of course, you can get away, and they're more effective This book says for political and military assassination. And they took to silencers. Uncle Sam and his soldiers got thrilled with the idea of silencers and began to perfect them. They said they're good because the source of the fire is masked. You can't get the exact location of where it comes from. The range is not easy to determine. The type of weapon cannot be determined. And the number of weapons can't be determined. And this reminds me of Dealey Plaza, where I believe there were silencers in a crossfire, and the 3 bullets that were heard, 3 to 4 bullets, were only a part of the bullets that were shot when John Kennedy was killed. And there was a silencer in the Ambassador Hotel when Robert Kennedy was killed, and in Laurel, Maryland, when George Wallace was shot. This book says psychologically it gives you a feeling of security because it gives you a chance to get away, and greater accuracy, and the operational use of silencer goes with clandestine operations. Great Britain started using them in 1938. There was an idea to use a silencer to kill Adolf Hitler, but it was after World War II, when the Office of Strategic Services was formed, and then the CIA, that they really got involved with silencers and with the Green Beret. And the firearms of the Special Forces were mostly silencers. This book goes on to tell how Captain Gary Powers was shot down over Russia in the U-2, and he carried with him, of course, at the time, HD pistol with a .22 caliber fitted with a silencer. This has been a standard operation of our military for quite a long time, since the CIA was formed, and I don't know why the media keeps smearing the idea that as these witnesses are slain, important witnesses that could testify in Washington, why they give us the business that the mafia has to be using this weapon, when there's a whole book out just on this, and experts that do talk about these silencers and have details of how they're made and what you do with them. This book on the silencers, as I say, goes into the special forces and the military using them. It said they were a tremendous help for night patrol work. Sentries could be killed. And you didn't have to use a knife or garrote or karate. A silencer was just a small weapon that did the job at a distance, and we certainly did use them. There were cases where federal agents were arrested 2 of organized crimes hitmen, and they confiscated their silenced pistols. The hitmen carried them. Early in 1971, a silencer was equipped to the M14 at Fort Bragg, and they started training there at Fort Bragg with the silencers. This weapon was confiscated in Atlanta, Georgia. They were using them down there, but they were used in Florida, and they were a standard weapon and made quite efficiently by the CIA. The OSS operatives they model the high standard HD, which is now the CIA's official sidearm for its clandestine operations. It seems General Donovan, who helped with the OSS and formed the CIA, one of the first production models of the silenced pistol, went to the White House where President Roosevelt was. He went up there with a gun in his pocket. Nobody had examined him. And he had a sandbag in his hand. And he put the sandbag in the corner of the room, and the president was dictating to his secretary, and no one paid too much attention to General Donovan. And there was this little tiny click, and some bullets came out into the sandbag, and no one looked up. And then the general walked over to the president and had a handkerchief around the hot barrel, and he handed him this little pistol to Franklin Roosevelt. And he said, "Mr. President, I just fired 10 live bullets from a new SS silent pistol, and they're in that sandbag." That's how old and how efficient the silencers were, and they have been used. This book goes on to say the CIA used silencers in their plots to kill Fidel Castro, either before or after the Bay of Pigs operation, and they have sharpshooters armed with silencers equipped, Belgian models, and this is common. They've been using them and use them in their manual at the time they were supposed to kill Fidel Castro. And that would explain how you could take a man like Jimmy Hoffa away. You meet him for lunch, and he's out with friends or in a car, and before he can jump out, or John Rosselli can get away, you can use these silencers and kill these men, because the CIA uses them, and the witnesses are dying, and they're a common weapon of the government and the intelligence community. And there's no reason, as I say, and I keep wanting to repeat it, that the FBI keeps telling us that the mafia are using the CIA weapons. There is every reason to believe the CIA is killing these witnesses before they can testify, and to make sure they're not around to testify. There are other people like George de Mohrenschildt, an important witness who was killed with a 20-gauge shotgun in his mouth, which is a pretty hard feat, and what we wouldn't know by the people around him whether somebody could tiptoe in and even use a silencer and then put that gun on the floor next to his body. There were no tests really that were consistent with a thorough homicide investigation when he was buried. This book says another CIA-sponsored assassination plot was revealed in a manuscript of a book being written about the CIA in 1965 by Rolando Cubelas Sacada. And the assassination was supposed to be a 7.62 millimeter Belgian assault rifle equipped with a large telescopic sight and silencer. The silencer was crude and amateurish, and the person that was to kill Castro is now in a Cuban prison. But the main point is that this could have happened at Dealey Plaza if they had their 7.6 Carcano. There could be a 7.62 millimeter Belgium assault rifle with a telescopic sight and silencer that could be shooting for John Kennedy. Robert Mayu, who worked for Howard Hughes from 1957 through 66, was asked by the CIA to be a front for the Castro assassination, and he hired mobsters just similar to the article I read you earlier on the program, and these men had silencers, and the FBI used silencers, this book says, and the CIA uses silencers, and it is a common weapon. There's a lot of things of interest in that book on the assassination and the use of silencers. If you want to get the address, you can write to me again, and I'll give it to you if you're interested in the subject. I think we have to think in terms of silencers when we count the bullets, as I say, in the Ambassador Hotel and Dealey Plaza, and the attempted Castro killings, and the use of them now with people disappearing silently and then being cut up to pieces. The silencer is very much used today. Well, I see our time is up. If you want more information on this, if the subject interests you, we can go into a little more, but I think you get the point. I dwelled a lot on the assassination method and tools, and we'll do more on the magazine Assassin when it comes out, and hopefully maybe I'll send them an article, and we'll see how that goes.
There is a truth, I thought to myself, while driving down Route 68. The car in front is a Renault. It's not behind, it's not a Ford. There is a truth in how things happen. If it was yesterday, it wasn't 1894. And if tomorrow's gonna too come true, there'll be another truth in store. And those who think there is no truth, that all depends on point of view, will lock us up and fire the bombs made only for a gentleman to use. The president is just a choice. He should not incite or claim his fame. One November night I heard the screaming horns. A new America had changed her name. We're not the same, you and I are not. You who called free thinkers enemies, you are clearly now the enemies. And we will do what we must do to keep it free, like I must write and she must sing and they must slave. You must have heard that we will never really rise again. The minds behind the plastic bugles gave the word that they cannot just mow us down. It's they who are the arch anemic ones. Ours are free and tender girls, ours are mountain climbing sons. So you and I would disagree that truth exists but misery. I cry for you, I cry for us, as I prepare to leave the bus. There is a truth for you and me, to feast our eyes upon and see.